Okay, let's get this show on the road. Great evening, great evening. Shadid Elazer here, and you are attending the Baltimore SharePoint Users Group February virtual meeting. This is uh, going into the 2021 campaign, continuing on with our virtual meetings and going to some basic announcements of who we are, what we do, before we bring on our featured speaker for the evening. So the way this meeting will work, typically when we meet in person, there's the time where doors open, give people time to park, come in and eat. Of course, with virtual, the the world famous catering that we have come to be known for, we need to find another alternative for that. So we get right into announcements and presentations and or discussions as a alternative as we're meeting virtually. So that's what we'll be focused on this evening. We have a great presentation coming up, and so looking forward to that. So, what is Baltimore SharePoint? The first things first, this meeting is being streamed through our partner social media channels and networks. So, I must assume that there are people who are hearing my voice and seeing this slide presentation who have never heard of Baltimore SharePoint Users Group. And so it's important to give a bit of an overview. So since 2007, the Baltimore SharePoint Users Group has existed. And so was started out as a community that came together during the release of early release of MOS 2007, and it was created in order to basically find answers to questions that were not available online. So during this time period, there were not as many, let's say, MSDN posts, and TechNet wasn't as robust, and many other resources that we come to basically enjoy today in terms of resources didn't exist. The co-founders of this group, which are myself and Eric Harlan, were working at a design firm which took on the responsibility to support clients, support businesses who were MOS 2007 early adopters. So they were, many of the companies were doing very heavy development on SharePoint Enterprise features. And so that led to a lot of things breaking in the original code base and native features. So we had to find an answer. And that's where Baltimore SharePoint's base and foundation originated. So since then, we've had a meeting every month. The only time we don't have a meeting is on the third Saturday of the month each year, which is our annual SharePoint Saturday conference. And SharePoint Saturday is a one-day event where the best and brightest speakers in the region come together, free event where you can essentially learn what you need to know from end user, administrator, project manager, developer. And there's different information tracks of 60 to 75-minute sessions featuring your favorite speakers from the region. And so that's the Beastbug story. So Beastbug is the longest running Microsoft focused community institution within our land. So many great professionals and talent have come through Baltimore SharePoint, and we continue to keep the doors open no matter what and continue to hold meetings. So every third Thursday of the month, that has not changed since 2007. When we talk about quantifying what we've been able to do, the numbers since, let's say, have gone up where Microsoft professionals have become speakers, trainers, authors, publishers, and so on and so forth, freelancers, entrepreneurs. And most notably, one of the things I'm most proud of is that three Microsoft practices, official gold partners, have started within our membership. That means they were members of Baltimore SharePoint. Something catastrophic happened, let's say, with their employment, or in one particular case, a group of friends got together and said, we want to build a business based on our standards. And so that's where Baltimore SharePoint continues to shine. And we're looking to have more partnerships where we can, let's say, offer our meetings to, let's say, youth audiences, underserved communities, and help people learn Microsoft technology in ways and have access to, let's say, Microsoft directly in ways that we've only begin to scratch the surface. Special thanks to Pro Object. Now, we typically meet in person for Pro Object meetings, but we're virtual. But we're thankful for their continued support and as we continue through this virtual phase. And so we thank Pro Object, based in Hanover, Maryland. At one point, it's ranked one of the top 100 places to work within Maryland. Special thanks to Ted Staley, who has basically provided us with the entrance to the meeting space and given us the opportunity to have stability in our meetings. So very important. So special thanks to you, sir. And if you have any sort of challenges on the job, meaning your career path with your company may be coming to an end, and maybe layoffs coming, please email me directly at hello@mrshadid.com, and I'll make sure that your resume makes it over to Ted Staley, and as they have various openings that are shared each and every month. Moving forward with community events. So when we talk about community events, we have the Microsoft 365 Career Fair coming up tomorrow. It takes place in California, but through the magic of the internet, you can log in virtually and take part. And so that will be coming up. And then May 14th, 2021 will be uh, Microsoft 365 Philly, formerly known as SharePoint Saturday Philly. So that would also be a virtual event. Now, in terms of Baltimore SharePoint news and announcements, the SharePoint Saturday Baltimore committee is beginning the discussions on planning. If you have an interest in helping to plan our virtual SharePoint Saturday conference, then please let me know directly. Also, B-Spug member Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is looking to install SharePoint 2016, having some challenges with certain aspects of SQL Server. and needs some assistance. So if you have any time, then please reach out and let's get that facilitated. Um, so Baltimore, SharePoint Saturday, Baltimore, and Mike Tyson is looking to get some assistance on the sequel end of SharePoint 2016. You can work out, let's say, an exchange of coffee in exchange for knowledge. And so that's what we'll do here. Now, moving forward, we are going to talk the federal job market. Now, DC happens to be the world's #1 federal job market for what we do here in the SharePoint community. And there's one gentleman that if you're going to ask about careers, if you're going to ask about resumes, if you're going to ask about opportunities, and we happen to have him here as a featured speaker tonight. So I'm going to bring to the floor, make sure you have the ability to share your screen here, Scott. Okay, bring to the floor Scott Brewster. Unmute yourself and.
Yep, I have unmuted myself. On trying to see. I can't share just the application.
When you share your screen, you can either share your browser or share your slides.
Portion of screen. Let me do that.
There we go.
Oop. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So, yeah, as Shadid said, I run the DC SharePoint Users Group. If you are not a member of the DC SharePoint Users Group, I'd ask that you go out onto meetup.com and find it, because that's how I usually send out job postings that I know of. And also, you've got my email address here if you want to forward me a resume. I go over a lot of people's resumes very frequently just to help them, eliminate things and whatnot, just to be friendly. But there are a couple companies that I work with where I might get paid. I'll be very open whenever that happens. But I'd say like 95% of the job postings, there's nothing in it for me. I just want a strong SharePoint community, because the stronger the community is and the better reception of SharePoint the clients will have, and the more they like it, the more work we get to generate. And I want every federal agency out there to absolutely love SharePoint so that they want more people, and it drives up our wages. So I just want good people in the right slots. And it's good for me also to just be aware of what contracts have landed, who's looking, and what the prices are for those positions, because I might want to jump. Currently, right now, I am not looking to jump. I have a very sweet assignment making what I was making whenever I was working in a facility with my clearance and a polygraph and so much bureaucracy. It was painful, and I had a very far commute. I felt like I was living in a scene from the movie Final Destination, every commute that I ever made. And so I'm a lot happier with my current client. How's that? So let's just get into this. And you saw a switch in the slides, yeah?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So who can work in the federal market? A lot of green card folks end up working in some of the federal civil agencies, but not a whole lot of them. During the last administration, there was a very large push to hire American first if they could. So a few companies, mostly the bigger companies, were like, look, if we can find an American, we have to find an American. So they stopped looking for a lot of foreign nationals that were here under visas. But some of the smaller companies that sub to them will pick up visa holders in a heartbeat because they love to abuse them and get them to work for half the rate that the market allows. Because the market in the federal space is better than the private sector. US citizens is what they would typically want. Of course, no felonies because you're going to be getting a background check. The DOD, Department of Defense, is huge. They have specific requirements. The intelligence community is probably a lot bigger than you ever realized. And the federal civilian workforce is also very large, but they have the least stringent requirements to go in. The public trust clearance that you might find on some of these job descriptions, they'll say that they either want you to have it or that you can get it because it's the easiest one for them to get. It's a very simple background check that they do. It runs underneath another program called HSPD 12. I don't recall what that means, but that was a big push about 12, 13 years ago. I was working for the agency that ran all the clearances for DOD, the DOD CAF, Clearance Adjudication Facility. And so I got to know a lot more about the clearance process than most people would ever like to know. So if you're working DOD or you're looking for any of these positions with the DOD, you have to meet 8570 requirements. DOD 8570 is a regulation that says if you are going to have any access to an IT system that has more than user credentialing, they want you to have Security Plus as a baseline information assurance certification. Even though if you are a site collection admin and that is your role, just managing other people's content, you probably have no real requirement for Security Plus, but that's what they're going to demand of you. So you automatically become a lot more valuable once you have that base level certification. If you do not currently have it, it's nice for your resume, even if you don't want to work in this space. I highly recommend that you do it. It can be difficult for some folks because the content is a mile wide and an inch deep whenever they go for that test. They'll ask you all kinds of things about hash algorithms and just things that you'll never need with what you do inside of SharePoint. The intelligence community will require security clearances, some of them more stringent than others. Some agencies ask for full financial disclosures every other year. It's no longer a 5-year periodic review. If you have held a top secret clearance within the last 2 years and it was active within the last 2 years, it's going to be a lot easier for you. If you haven't had a clearance active in the last 2 years, it's like starting over from scratch. If you've never held a clearance at all, you might want to thank yourself for not having to deal with some of the mess that's involved with the investigation that's involved, because the paperwork is huge. If you have any foreign entanglements whatsoever, like My wife is originally from Korea. It's a lot of extra stuff. If you have family members who have done anything not so nice, like my twin who went to Russia and claimed to be a member of the Communist Party years ago. That was a hindrance for a minute. So that'll be harder. The higher the clearance, the harder it is for the big five intelligence community agencies. You will probably also need a polygraph. If you work for DIA, NGA, NRO, FBI, CIA, NSA, yes, 6 of them, they require security, the polygraph. The polygraph for most of these is what's called a counterintelligence polygraph. And then FBI and NSA and CIA require a lifestyle polygraph. The lifestyle polygraph, they're going to try to break you. I've seen them break people. It's been in the news where they've broken people under questioning to admit to crimes they never did. The counterintelligence polygraph is a lot easier. They'll just ask you the same questions that are on the SF-86, which is the form that you fill out to get a clearance, like, have you ever been a member of an organization determined to overthrow the U.S. government, and things like that. You run through those questions, you pass, you're good, or so at least so I thought. I'm still waiting on adjudication. It's been 2.5 years, 3 years. Yeah, 3 years now since I passed my last polygraph, and they haven't adjudicated the clearance. The adjudication period can take an extremely long time. So if you think you're going to go from having no clearance to having a security clearance, it's unlikely, unless you are looking to intern. A lot of, if you've got younger people in your life who are in college, or you're in college right now, or even in high school, you have the opportunity to intern with a lot of the companies that are in this space. I would highly suggest that you do, because then you can get that clearance and it will make you very valuable. If, however, you're starting over from scratch, you're 30 years old, you've never held a security clearance in your life, going through the contractor route might be a lot more difficult than for you to apply directly for federal employment. If you are federal employment with zero experience in the federal government, your rank when you join is going to be very, very low. You have to accept that you're going to get paid very little. But after 1 year, then you can go hop over to be a contractor, because you'll have enough time and grade and experience to say that you're worth something more, make a lot more money as a contractor, and then later, if you want to go back to the federal civilian workforce, you can then try to jump back. And I've seen people go from GS7 to contract to GS13. So that's a big jump in the pay scale. And it's just because they pay so little for people who are brand new to the federal government. The public trust, like I said, it's a very simple and easy background check. As long as you don't have any felonies, you don't have any recent bankruptcies that are not medical related, for the most part, you're going to be able to get through. I mean, bad people don't get their security clearances. There are a lot of people who will fail a polygraph, even if they're not lying, and that's because they have anxiety issues or high blood pressure. And I don't know what to tell you there. They don't make a lot of exceptions. So, how is working at a federal agency different than the private sector? I've done a little bit of both now. and I worked, 10 years in the Army as well. So if you work as a contractor supporting DoD, I liked that, but I was also a former soldier. So when I say I liked that, the first time I went to work for an Army unit again after leaving, I'd been in a couple other organizations, and they took me down to where my office was going to be, and a master sergeant was yelling every expletive in the book at some young soldier. And I took a sigh of relief because it felt like home again. That might not be what you're expecting of home. Um, of course, they treat the contractors a lot nicer, especially the soldiers do. Um, and it's really up to the command of any individual unit to really make or break that experience, because some commanders will really believe in this one team, one fight. And sometimes they keep a very clear delineation between who the contractors are, who the government employees are, and what soldiers do. So it gets kind of clicky. So you never know what that's going to be until you join that unit. The federal civilian side for the intelligence community, it's a lot more political. And I'm not talking, like what you're watching on the news. I'm talking, office politics and stuff. Are you wearing the right tie? Are you dressed properly every day? Um, they, there's a big effort to keep the contract. So there's a lot of brown nosing of the government people who manage those contracts. And they're going to want you to help play with that dog and pony show. So you have to be willing to do that. It's not anything degrading or anything. It's just part of the game. There is often a lot of animosity, especially I'd say more so in the intelligence community than in the federal civilian side that I've worked for. Federal civilian side that I've worked for, like a Social Security Administration where I am right now, everyone is a lot more cordial. I've not seen a lot of, hey, this is government space only, don't get involved, except for my parking, which was way down the hill from the building. That's not been bad. But within the intelligence community, there was a lot more animosity between contractors and govies because the govies knew that the contractors made more money and they were angry about that. But the whole reason why the contractors exist is because a lot of the government employees, learned enough about IT in the 90s to get into the federal government and never learned anything since. And so they have become the management for the contractors that they bring in. With every change in the administrations, you'll see a shift in hiring focus as far as, are they going to grow contracts or shrink contracts and grow the federal civilian workforce? I don't know how that's going to work out right now because of the economy, the COVID situation. It's a very different ball game at the moment. But you'll see that the contractors look at the govies and they're like, they don't do any work. I'm here to do all the work. And the government employees will often look down on the contractors and pull ranks sometimes. You just have to be willing to put up with it. I wouldn't say that the federal government, them as my customer, is much different from the private sector folks that I've supported as a negative. I wouldn't say the federal government is a negative, because what you'll notice also with the federal government is your work hours are your work hours. If you're 9 to 5, you're only 9 to 5. You're not coming in on the weekends. If there's some, major project that really needs to get delivered, it just doesn't get delivered. They push it right and they don't have a problem with it. So the projects get extended out longer. Contract companies love that because now they can write a modification of the contract, ask for more money, things like that. So the government, it's not their money, so they don't mind spending it. And so the urgency to get certain things done doesn't exist like the private sector. The companies they support in the private sector, if they want you there at 9 p.m. at night because something's going on, you're there at 9 p.m. at night. You're there at 11 o'clock. You're there at 1 a.m. I've done that. So there's a lot of benefit to going federal contract if you want a great quality of life and the money that's involved. But there are other factors that get involved, and that happens to be your contract companies that are out there. I have personal experience with a few of these. I currently work for Leidos. I worked for Northrop Grumman twice now. They were great people. It was just the nature of the contract. I worked for Booz Allen. I loved my immediate management at Booz Allen. There was a lot of good stuff going on there. But I would say of all of the agencies or all the big contract companies out there, only one company I would say had more insultants than consultants, and that would be Deloitte. GD, Raytheon, all of those defense companies that actually create weapon systems and stuff, they're very, very similar as far as management styles, benefit packages, and all that. All of the bigger companies are going to have a lot of those similar benefits packages and management styles. The companies where it's pure consultation, like Booz Allen, they're not making a product. Accenture, they're going to be a lot more political and a lot more focused on retaining contracts because it's very expensive to get a new contract. The amount of hours that are put into creating the bids and everything, it costs a lot of money for them to put them together. So they would rather keep a contract than try to reacquire a contract. Everything that they lose whenever they have to get rid of hundreds of people, sometimes if there's a shift, change, there's a big loss to their bottom line. And so it just doesn't help anybody for them to lose a contract. The smaller companies, I would say, pay better than the bigger companies. That's the best part about working for a smaller company. It's also nice that, your CEO might know you by name. They're wonderful people. I've got personal experience with Dan Solutions. Love them to death. I will never say a bad word about Jay and Larry, who run that company. Wonderful folks. They're always looking for people who have clearances with polygraph. If you've ever got anything you want to do, let them know. I got in a year and a half almost 50K in recruiting bonuses through that company, because I'd left the intelligence community and they were looking for other work. So they basically had me doing recruiting full time. And for everybody who had a polygraph, they gave me 10K. So I made 50K in a year and a half. Wonderful people. Black Spoke, Very similarly run. I know their CEO and president. Both of them are very good people. They do a lot to attract top quality candidates because they get very stable contracts. With when you have high quality folks, you get a stable contract. You're not you know uh, boom and bust because you looked great on paper. Then the agency realized you couldn't deliver, and so they cut you. Um, they're good people. AIS has some good people. They've supported the DC SharePoint user group a few times. I've had a recruiter from BRMI talk at one of our sessions. They've got some good folks going on over there. Planet, if you've never met them, they have like baseball card business cards, and they've got a lot of authors in the SharePoint space. Lovely people. I don't have anything bad to say about them. Got a couple of friends who still work over there. ActionNet, I only bring them up because they were big over at DISA, the Defense Information Systems Agency. I had no love for them. In order to get their contract balanced out, they found a couple really high-speed individuals so that they could list them as key people on their proposal. And then they hired a bunch of green folks. And this is also called greening the contract. But they would eliminate the really good people who were making better money and hire brand new people for a lot lower wage. And this is so because they get paid the same whether or not they're paying you 150K or 120K, they're still getting 180K for you. So they want to eliminate the people who get the highest salaries and only have the people who are, willing to make, less than 100,000. There are folks out there, and because they don't realize their worth, you know, uh, if you are a SharePoint, professional, you've been doing this for 4 to 5 years at least. If you're working as a contractor to the federal government, you should not be making less than six figures. If you are currently making less than six figures, talk to me. I will hook you up with someone who will pay you properly. But they love to green these contracts and bring new people on who are willing to work for less. And it's really bad for the contract long run because then the government realizes they're not very good at what they're doing.
Yes,
Uh,
Scott, we have a question from Mike Tyson. He
uh-huh.
raised his hand. Can you please? Okay. I left a comment.
Okay.
Okay, continue on, please.
Okay. So 1099 folks. I know a couple folks who are working as 1099 employees, so they could do their own taxes and stuff because I don't know, I guess they're into BDSM. Um, I personally like the W2 route. I know a lot of folks who like the 1099 route. They can make a lot more money by eliminating a lot of those tax obligations, writing things off. So I know a lot of folks who want a 1099. A lot of companies that, um, especially the bigger companies, unless you're supporting the bigger company, not one of its contracts, probably won't want to 1099 you. You become a liability. And that's because, like, my CEO over at Dance Solutions, he knew a guy, a CEO of a company, he had all 1099 employees. And that way, it was easier for his accounting. He didn't have to worry about making all the tax payments and stuff. Thought it'd be okay, thought they would pay their taxes. A lot of those employees did not file their taxes. And the IRS went after the CEO, saying that he should have, W-2'd them and stuff instead. And he was on the hook for like $2.5 million. And that would be probably one of the most painful experiences of my life if I had to go through that. I would not wish the IRS on any of my enemies. So, you know, all I'm saying is there are some 1099 opportunities out there. It's not going to exist at the higher security clearance levels. And that's mainly because they have to be able to have a facility clearance on you. The facility clearance is the whole company has to have a certain clearance rating because of all of your vendors that you're working with, all of your employees have to meet certain requirements, and your building, wherever your offices are, have to meet certain requirements. So if they're going to put that kind of investment out there, they're going to make you a W-2 employee. When it comes to your resume and you're trying to submit your resume to all these different jobs out there, or if you ever go to any of these recruiting fairs, you want your clearances and your certificates on top. Because on their contracts that they're looking for, the government will give them a job description and say, this is what we need. And it might read very stupid, saying that they want someone with 10 years of Swift language experience, whenever it hasn't been around for anywhere close to 10 years. They might want someone, I've seen many times, they wanted someone with 6 years of SharePoint 2013, but, it was 2015 at the time. Like a lot of funny requirements for stuff like that. There's a little bit of wiggle room. But usually if they say that we want this person to have an ITIL certification, a PMP certification, Security Plus certification, MC SE certification for SharePoint or whatever, those are not usually waiverable. On Security Plus, the 8570 requirement for baseline information assurance certifications, they might give you up to 6 months from the date of hire to get the certification. That's a risk for them. So if you don't have it, you're already going to go down a couple points. So go ahead and get that. But they don't like to give a lot of leeway on some of those certification requirements. Whenever they ask about education, they will have a table that they work off of to say that, okay, if you've got 10 years of experience, you don't need the degree. But they will ask for that degree because whenever they look at the labor rates that are spelled out in the contracts, someone with this many years of experience and or a degree is authorized to get this much money to the company. So every FTE might make $180 an hour to the company. The company then, pays for its overhead and all that other stuff. And then you get paid and then they get their profit. So if they have the option of hiring somebody who's going to get them $180 an hour or $165 an hour, they're going to pay for the $180 an hour guy, even if their margin is lower, because the overall income to the company is greater, and that looks good for investment purposes, because once you're at a certain level, then you're able to bid for other contracts. It gets kind of complicated, but they're going to look for all of these things to be met. You might be able to get in without the education requirement if you've got enough certifications and time and experience. But if you have that degree, you want to throw that up on top. That's the first thing that they're going to look for. And the last thing that they're going to look for is the date of the adjudication of your last clearance. Obviously, if you've never had a clearance, this doesn't matter. But if you've had a clearance, you want the date for its last adjudication on top. If you have not had the clearance active in the last 2 years, don't even bother. If you email the recruiter a cover letter or whatever, you can say that you had an active clearance 3 years ago. It's not really going to do them anything. It's not that they have anything against you. It's the amount of bureaucracy that they have dealing with the adjudication, outfits for all the different agencies, would they take them? There are times whenever the skill set is in such short demand or high demand and limited quantity that the government will sponsor the clearance. Understand, the companies do not sponsor clearances. The contracts sponsor clearances. So if for like whenever I got my last position at DIA, I had gone too long from a periodic review. I had a TS, but not a TSSCI. So they knew that they would have to do a completely new investigation on me in order for me to join. And that took like 9 months. The folks at Dan Solutions knew my background, knew who I was, and were willing to take the risk of get me that clearance, from the client, and losing me, if I decided to go somewhere else after I got the clearance. They were willing to take that risk. And because they're willing, I stayed as long as I could to support them. And, I got that clearance out of it. A lot of people will try to jump as soon as they get their clearance. And that has made the clients very averse to getting new people clearances. So the primary way that you would work the clearance process is you find a public trust position like what I'm currently in right now as the Social Security Administration. It's easy to get a public trust, as long as you have a decent background, no felonies, no warrants, you're probably going to get it, right? And it takes a couple of weeks, done. Now you're working for a big company like Leidos. I'm working for Leidos right now. Leidos has, positions out there that require a secret. They have positions that require a top secret. They have positions that require the polygraphs. So while they are able to bill for you, they will shop around with all of their contracts and find out if there's one of them that they would be able to get that client to sponsor you so that you can work your way up. You have to go through mostly the bigger companies to get someone to work you up that ladder. Or you have to be just, in a very high demand skill where people just don't exist with that clearance. Understand, most people get their clearances because they were former military or they went and worked for the government. And then they were in the government and they decided to go out and become a contractor. A lot of folks that were interns, they might have, worked up that way by getting the clearance and then working from there to get into a contracting job that required the clearance. There aren't a whole lot of people who, they put out their resume on LinkedIn. They've got, 6 years working for some private company, and they're like, hey, we want you to come join, the CIA as our client, working for, our company. It's not going to happen. Just will not happen. Unless, of course, that technology is such a niche that they can't get anyone who already has a clearance. It's oftentimes easier for them to find someone who's tech savvy and train them in the new technology than to find someone who knows the technology and get them a clearance. The process is just so much longer and more expensive to get you the clearance than to train somebody in the technology. Salaries. Small companies tend to pay better when they're the prime on the contract. There are a lot of small business set-aside contracts out there where they will say, hey, this contract is for 30 people. Big companies not allowed to bid on it, but big companies are allowed to be subcontractors to it. And so you'll find, some of these big companies that are underneath a small company, and it's a weird incestuous relationship, because I've seen, this company win using resumes for the bigger company, and the bigger company had those employees, and as soon as they won, those employees were shifted to the smaller company, so that smaller company could be the prime, because they have to have at least 50%, more than 50% of the work. And so they just moved employees from one company to the other, and the bigger company was the subcontractor. In all reality, that smaller company was some business that they created on the side. It's weird stuff that they do sometimes, but typically the smaller companies pay better. Like the folks at Blacksburg that I was talking about, it's very easy, if you really know your stuff, to make 170, 180 thousand a year, if you really know your stuff and you're able to get that polygraph and the clearance. Big companies, though, they're going to have the bigger benefits package, the bigger 401k package, the bigger dental package, the bigger medical package, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you have a lot of health issues with family members, probably going to be better to go with the bigger company than the smaller company. Also, bigger companies will have somewhere for you to fall in case they need to shrink the contract. Government all the time will look at its budget and say, hey, we need to shrink this, and recover a couple $1,000,000 over this, huge contract. And so they'll look to trim, 5 people, because that's about $1,000,000 for them. And, you might have to leave. Well, it's not because you're a bad person or anything. So if the company still likes you, they're going to be able to look around at all of their other current openings and slide you in there pretty quickly. It costs money to recruit anybody, so they would rather reuse people from within the company. Recruiters make good money. Like I said, Dan Solutions paid me $50K over about 1.5 years of some of the recruiting that I'd done for them. And, that's awesome. But again, that's for very specific positions requiring the clearances and all that stuff, because the positions were so hard to fill. That's why they're able to make money. And because of the money, now you have headhunters who get out there. And headhunters are not good people. There are a couple companies, I'd rather leave them nameless, but you might have gotten calls from them before, like out of New York. And they'll be like, hey, I've got a company who needs this. You look great, blah, blah, blah. They make you sound, they will blow up your ego, making you feel like you're sexy and stuff. You're not. They're going to try to slide you in there because they get 10% off of your salary. So that's a big chunk of money. And they might even go for more than that, because they're going to get paid the same whether or not you make more or less. So if they can slide you in for less money to their client, which is a company, not the government, then they make more and the company does better because you're willing to take less. Sometimes, by the nature of reading the position descriptions, you can figure out who the client is based on who has the contracts at those different agencies, and search on some of the keywords that they're looking for in that job description, and you'll find that the company has its own ad on its own website. And if you look at the salary that they offer, it's going to be maybe $20,000 difference from what those headhunters are saying they can get you to what the company is willing to pay if you go directly through them. But because of their contractual relationship, you can't give your resume to both. If you give your resume to the headhunter, they get like first dibs. And so you don't want to work with them. There are a couple companies out there that aren't so bad, like Apex, Tech Systems. They're not that bad. And that's good if you really do want to stay in the 1099 market and jump around and do some different things. They've got some good stuff going on. It's the really big ones that I'm just not a big fan of. The market outlook, I would say that it's definitely growing. And the main reason why is because all of a sudden last year, a lot of companies that only had on-premises SharePoint environments suddenly got Office 365 and they have no clue what the hell they're doing. And they are desperate for quality help. They might have had a SharePoint 2013, 2010 farm, and so the quality of their developers isn't the same. For the modern UI, you need to have TypeScript knowledge to create SPFX web parts. And if you don't have those skills, you need to get those skills, because all of a sudden, everyone's got to have all these things to work in Office 365, Microsoft 365, whatever we want to call it today. And so a lot of the folks that I knew working in SharePoint positions within the government were at least 3 years behind in their knowledge base. They weren't going to these SharePoint conferences. They weren't attending the user groups. They knew how to spell SharePoint. Someone slid them into the job. They had no idea what the hell they were doing. And I would get so frustrated knowing they're making almost what I make, and they're at my desk every day asking me how to do some basic stuff. Drove me nuts. So they're probably going to lose their jobs pretty quickly, or would never try to leave their current one because they know no one would hire them for the new skills that they're looking for. So if you have the skills right now, you're prime in order to be able to get into some of these federal contract jobs. Current openings. I am going to share, and I'm going to share the whole desktop. We can click that. You see my whole desktop? Shadid? Shadid. Okay, I'm sharing. Okay. So I just want to go out there and tell you where you can go. So security clearance jobs, or clearancejobs.com. They are not going to have those public trust positions, but they're going to have a lot of other positions that require clearances. What I found interesting was that there are a lot of locations that need people with security clearances that I had no idea for. So if we say SharePoint, but say you want to work in New York, right? There are a whole bunch of them. I mean, and for me, I'm saying this is a whole bunch, right? Who would think that you would need a secret security clearance for a job in New York City, right? I'm thinking most of these things exist on military installations, which usually never have any decent sized city nearby that you would want to live in, and DC. But New York has the largest law enforcement agency in the world, the NYPD. It's also got very large FBI offices and things like that. So they actually have very large number of people who need clearances. And so you'll find a lot of SharePoint people that get put in as business analysts. So you might want to look for those. Obviously systems administrators and things like that. Otherwise, there are, companies out there like Indeed, Monster, and stuff like that. It costs them money to put things out there. Most recruiters, for cost efficiency, will immediately go to LinkedIn first. It's cheaper. It's a pretty sunk cost, and reach out to people. They will obviously always post on their own websites because it doesn't cost them anything. So you want to get a list of all those companies that you're thinking, hey, they sound like good people, and just continue to hit their website. Submit your resume to their website, because the first thing they're going to do when they get a new position is they're going to look through all of the resumes that they have gotten in the last year for people who, meet the requirements. They don't want to look older than that because, skills might have changed. You might have moved on. So it's usually about a year's worth. Again, Planet's one of these smaller companies, very good that you can work for. Leidos is who I'm with right now. They have a number of SharePoint positions in the area. And they are nice enough to clearly designate for you the clearance required. So if you're in Northern Virginia, public trust, oh my, that's a very good, easy position for someone who has never had a clearance to get into right now, if you know what you're doing. Microsoft SharePoint developer, public trust. I think this one, if I remember, is for the civil rights division of some agency. That would be a very nice assignment for a lot of folks. And understand that for the most part, right now, it might say no potential for telework, but you're all working from home because of COVID. So it's not a bad thing. If you guys find someone Leidos that you like, hit me up. I can put it in there. I only get like $500 or whatever if it's from Leidos. Dance Solutions, they've got a few things here. A lot of what they're looking for right now is not SharePoint related, but they often do need SharePoint folks. They're looking at a lot of SCOM, things like that. A lot of folks are looking for some Linux stuff right now, which I found interesting. I love Linux. If you can't tell, the machine that I'm using right now is Linux. I haven't used a Windows machine in almost 4 months other than my work computer. I highly suggest that you go to all of these companies and look at Glassdoor. One, they tell you what you're able to get for a lot of those jobs near you. But if I look at BRMI, that's a decent company. I mentioned them earlier. They have the developer position. They got a 4.2 star. So that's better than Khaki. Khaki's known as a good company, but 4.2 is pretty high for Glassdoor. Okay, so anything over 4 is pretty darn good. So compensation, benefits, culture, values, blah blah blah. That's really nice. A smaller company, like I said, smaller ones are better to work for. It's good stuff. So their ratings, right? 90% would recommend to a friend, 80% approve of their CEO. That's good. That's really good. And you see this was in Chantilly, Virginia. They've got some here in Silver Spring. And you can find a lot of other smaller companies that you might not have heard of because they are a sub to a sub to a sub and, things like that. If you go and you Google SharePoint Public Trust, you're going to be able to find some things. And we have, federal government is not only in DC, you've got the federal government all over. And we have contractors who support the government all over. So yes, St. Louis, Missouri, you've got a lot of stuff. You've got a lot of stuff in Atlanta. You've got a lot of stuff all over, not just in the DC area. And the good thing about this is when you figure out where some of these things are, you can figure out your career path. I got into this and the whole SharePoint speaking thing because I wanted to figure out where I wanted to move to when I finally left the DC area. I'm not a big fan of the commutes that I have. I'm not a big fan of the state government. I'm not a big fan of DC and their politics and everything else. They annoy the snot out of me. I wanted to find what state would be nice to live and has job potential for me. So you can find these positions, get the better pay for DC, and then move to somewhere where you want to retire. And so, that's how I got started to look at all this is, just trying to figure out where I want to go eventually. And right now I'm thinking the Charlotte area or maybe Raleigh, North Carolina. Social Security Administration has a very big office in Raleigh. So that would be a very nice, easy move for me. And I think the North Carolina would have better weather and whatnot. So if you Google around and you look, you can find a lot of the contracts that the government is looking to do. And then you can find out who got those contracts. And then you know who to go for. So if you have a particular niche that you're filling right now because you've been doing records management stuff with SharePoint for 4 years, that's your bread and butter, you can look up who's doing these things so you know where to go and get hired to further your career down that niche. Also, of course, LinkedIn is your best friend. It is worth the extra, $25 I think I pay a month for the premium plan so that I can message people whenever I'm looking for somebody so that everybody can access me so that my profile gets pushed to the top whenever people are looking for someone new. I like it mainly because I'm always looking for other people because I've been trying to fill some of those positions for Black Smoke and Dan Solutions for a while, just because, hey, who doesn't want an extra 10K? But if you look at all these things that they have under the premium, you're able to get a lot more information and figure out what you want to do. So that's important. And then all the different jobs that are out there. This one, okay, so whenever I first started at Social Security Administration, I worked as a sub to a sub to a sub to a sub. I did not want to leave Dan Solutions. And so Dan Solutions ended up being a sub to one company. And then they were a sub to PSI PAX. PSI PAX was a sub to Northrop Grumman. Last week, I got hit up with a job requirement that looked almost identical to my old job. And I was confused. Northrop had to shrink that contract. So Leidos picked me up immediately. I left Northrop on a Friday. I started Leidos on a Monday, and this was during COVID. They just did some paperwork in order to transfer the laptop to be in the possession of Leidos instead of Northrop, because they wanted me over in the one office and Northrop had to shrink. But a good buddy who's over at Social Security Administration right now is leaving out of state and cannot hold the job anymore. So they have put his position back out there, and there are a lot of subcontract companies that are looking to hire to fill that. If you're at all interested in doing SharePoint developer stuff, doing TypeScript, understanding, all these different things, knowing Visual Studio, JavaScript, etc., and they do green card, hit me up because I can get you slid in there. It is a very good team. The guys on that team were very good. I liked them a lot. a couple of us had to leave, but we actually still talk. So not always will you find a team that you actually like everybody. And I like everybody on the team. Um, so if you're at all interested in this, I can connect you to the right people. Um, if you are at all interested in any other positions, let me know. If you've got an issue with your resume and you want me to look at it, not a problem. I'll be very front. If there's a potential for me to make a couple bucks on it, I'm going to let you know, just because I think that would be kind of rude not to. For most of the people that I've helped out, whenever I send out job notifications, I always tell them, I'm making money or not. And for the most part, I never do. But I like to put that out there. Anyway, are there any questions? Stop the sharing. Does anyone have? Oh, I can open chat now. So, yep, yeah, Mike. I know exactly what you're talking about. Where they took your resume and then they submit it, because a lot of the job opportunities that you find out there, especially on intelligencecareers.com, they are looking to mine resumes so that they can pick the best ones and use it in their proposal, to a request for proposal, RFP. And then once they get the contract, they will figure out who they want to hire. So a lot of times when they ask for your resume, they don't even have a job for you yet. How's the opportunity for technical project managers with deep SharePoint? The opportunity is very, very nice. Most PMs in the federal government space, with only a public trust, I would say you're looking at, 110 to 130, maybe a little bit more, depending on years of experience and PMP and all that good stuff, about 110 to 130. If you have the higher clearances, polygraph and all that, you could easily look at 150, 160 for a PM position. You asked, where am I located? I'm right outside of Baltimore. So Social Security is in Woodlawn, which is west side of Baltimore. And so that's a very nice commute for me now. I take back roads and then a little bit of highway. Commuting down to DC was a pain in the ass. A lot of the better jobs are in Northern Virginia. But I used to support some folks at Fort Meade years ago. And this is where the Army dropped me off whenever I got out. So that's why I'm here where I am here. ActionNet. Yeah, ActionNet sucks. Great with JavaScript and SharePoint 2013. What cert is most valuable for 365? There is a 365 developer cert. So that's going to be it. And then obviously, of course, the baseline security. Because even if you're in the federal civilian space like Social Security or whatever, they want you to have some information assurance certifications. It's the nature of the beast now with all of the hacks that have happened, or not necessarily hacks, but disclosures that have happened from folks like Ed Snowden or Bradley Manning or some of these other folks. They really want a lot more security on all these things. Any other questions? Okay, so again, you've got my email address, Scott@MadWhiteHatter. SharePointSuperheroes.com is my site. I really need to update it with more content. I've got a YouTube channel out there where I post the sessions from the DC SharePoint users group, and I'm trying to get some of my own content out there. And then, Twitter, SharePoint, SP Superheroes, if you want to follow me there. And if you got any questions about security clearance, if you ever had a clearance, you don't know what's going on with it, hit me up. I know more than I'd ever like to know about the security clearance process. Shadid, I am able to give it back to you now if you'd like.
Thank you, Scott. Excellent, excellent insight. Clearance wise, uh, we're in one of the hot spots in United States, but it's some of the information that was shared. If you do your homework based on what was shared, and you view the recording, which is on Facebook as well, then you'll pick up a lot of information on how to expand your job search. This is a topic that I've been around on the resume writing side, also on the clear side for quite some time. But the perspective that Scott brought to the table, it opened my eyes to a lot of things. And so hopefully you benefit from it as well. And so in this case, we want to make sure that if you are in a situation where your company is looking to make other decisions or get rid of you during this time, or projects, funding is being cut, that you reach out as soon as possible so that some contacts can be made on your behalf. So Scott is for a few years now been a go-to resource to make sure you can find placement. Please send your resume to me as well. And when people contact for Baltimore SharePoint, I can send them in your direction. So,
yep. I have a couple people who hit me up with positions. I always email out the DC Spug with those positions. If you're not a member of the meetup for the DC Spug, sign up so that you can get those emails. Especially the harder to fill ones, they'll hit me up and ask, "Hey, do you know anyone who can do this?" And I always send them people that I know. So if you are particularly in the market for, a lot of 1099 type projects and you want, short things like that, and U.S. citizen typically, because the company I'm speaking of specifically, let me know, because they support a lot of the smaller banks in the area. And they love to hire people for like, a 6-week gig. If you got, it's very important to use your network. I think that even today, with as technologically savvy as we all are, and even though we're all at home because of COVID, 65% of jobs are acquired through your network, not from, sending in your resume cold. You want to talk to people. You want to know the people in those contracts now that you want to go for. You want to know that it's a good environment before you get there, because the investment that you make is pretty big too, in the waiting and waiting and waiting for the paperwork to clear and everything else. You're basically saying no to a lot of other opportunities to say yes to that one. You want to make certain that that's the one that you want to go for. Do not jump around a lot between contracts, because then they will think that you're salary hopping and you won't stay very long for them. In order to get their money back from the recruiting and the efforts and all that stuff, typically a company needs to keep you around for at least 6 months to a year. So if you're looking at jumping contract to contract within 3 to 6 months, they're not going to want you.
great point. So, going to wrap things up for the evening. Thank you for tuning in to the broadcast, and enjoy your evening. Stay safe.
Ciao. I want a recording. Let me have it. I'll talk to you later.